Good morning to you, Alp.
Good morning, David.
This is a complete mess, isn't it?
Good morning.
It's been a complete mess for some years, actually. This is not something that's suddenly sprung up. We've been warning about it for the last 10, 15 years, that unless we get a grip and control immigration properly, it's simply going to go up and up and up. And it's all very well to say, you know, this is students, or it's Ukrainians, or it's Hong Kongers. But the fact is, what has happened over the past year is that 500,000 people who've come here, who need homes, who will need access to the NHS, who will drive around, who will do all sorts of things. It's this huge increase on our population, that is the real problem.
I mean,
students.
I was just going to say, I think it's a travesty, it's a shambles. It's also a breach of electoral promises made in 2019.
Well, absolutely. As we keep pointing out, excuse me, it's a bit early for a Saturday.
Sorry.
I think what's really interesting about all of those figures is that everybody keeps saying that we need migration because we have the biggest number of vacancies that we've ever had. We've had the biggest migration into the country that we've ever had, and yet there are still 1 million unfilled vacancies. So these migrants are not taking those jobs that everybody says we need them for.
Absolutely. There's 1.2 million people unemployed. There's 5.3 million people who are registered for out-of-work benefits. There's millions more, something like 6 million people, really, who are economically inactive. That is something that needs to be tackled before we turn to the fail-safe option for employers and bring in overseas workers. That is what cheaper workers, that is what employers want to do. And that is what the CBI wanted last week, and called on both Rishi Sunak and indeed Keir Starmer to say, please keep letting us have this access to cheaper labour. That has to stop.
So can we just talk about student visas? I mean, I was reading that 487,000 student visas have been given out in the last year. That is an increase of some 77%. You're right, we've had 267,000 refugees from Afghanistan, from Hong Kong and from Ukraine. The thing with these student visas is that you can actually bring your dependents, you can bring your families here. So, in fact, it's not just the 487,000, double it, triple it, because that's the real number, actually, in terms of the numbers that are coming here. Now, you're meant to leave at the end of your course, but the question I would ask is, why on earth are we allowing all these international students to come and study Mickey Mouse degrees at universities that they shouldn't be at, because that then leads them into a pathway where they can stay here even longer and then end up working in low-end jobs where actually, you're right, we need to be skilling our own people to do those jobs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's not just the fact that they can bring their families, but when students someone completes a degree, they can then stay on for a further 2 years to work in any job, not in a particularly skilled job, but they can stack shelves in the local supermarket. That is what we say to people. We've also invited graduates from 50 universities from around the world to come here simply because they've graduated at that particular university. That's bananas, frankly. We don't need to do it. That's the problem. And we do, as Keir Starmer said, to be fair to him, we do need to train our own. But the problem is that we are not going to do that, and that's not going to happen for so long as employers have access to this sort of cheaper overseas labour, including graduate students.
So when you push back, Alp, and you say to them, I mean, even Suella Braverman said, actually, we've lost control of immigration into this country. You know there's a problem when they admit it before the report is even published. So what's the answer here? What are you calling for? It was Boris Johnson who actually loosened those rules around students. So is the answer to say we're going to tighten the definition of students, tighten where they can go, and you can't stay for those extra 2 years after you finish your course?
Yeah, well, with regard to students, easy. there's no need for them to stay on for 2 years to work. So let's stop that. There's absolutely no need for those on postgraduate studies to bring in their family. We can stop that. With regards to those who are coming here to work, we've lowered, and this is something that Boris Johnson did. He said we're going to introduce a points-based system, he said, and this is going to have the effect of bringing all those we need in and keep out those we don't, and it's going to lower immigration. He actually said that. Well, it hasn't, because they've lowered the qualification and skills thresholds. You only have to have an A level now in order to call yourself highly skilled. The earnings levels have been lowered significantly. That can be changed overnight, frankly. You don't need legislation to do that. Employers don't have to any longer advertise locally to bring people in. That also is ridiculous that they can do that. So there's all sorts of things that can be done without legislation, and frankly the Home Office can simply change the rules without any difficulty at all.
Can I just read you a message here? This one is from James Cox. Good morning, James. James says, David, as a Brit who, together with my foreign-born wife, spent over £10,000 on visa fees, NHS surcharge, the medicals and tests to return to the UK together, my blood is boiling, seeing thousands allowed in for free, thousands more allowed to game the system. People just sense this sort of huge indignity to the whole system, and we've seen this before this morning, where you try and do it properly and you go through official channels, you spend a lot of money, you may or may not get through, you may or may not be denied that visa, but the easier option is to pop on a boat, come across the channel, and guess what? We stick you in the Holiday Inn.
Well, yes, that's illegal immigration, and we've been talking about legal immigration.
Indeed, but clearly we've got a problem with both, haven't we?
No, absolutely. But it's just more visible with regard to people jumping into boats and coming over. And incidentally, the 504 million, 500,000.
The 500,000. The 500,000.
The 504,000
net migration.
People, net migration, that doesn't include those who are coming in illegally. So you can add another probably around 60, 70,000, and it's not just those jumping in boats.
I think it's higher, actually. I think it's another 120,000 which are waiting to be processed, roughly.
Yeah, that is, but I mean those who are actually coming in.
Indeed, so 40,000
which makes it so much more difficult to clear them. Yeah, you can add all those, because you're right, those who are waiting to be cleared, how many of those are actually going to be removed, even if they're denied asylum or denied some sort of leave to stay here? Very, very few. So we're probably looking at not 500,000, but 600,000 people, if not more. And add to that the illegal population of the country, which is probably in the region of 1 to 1.5 million now. You're really talking about a lot of people that we have no control over, who have access to the services, need the homes and everything else.
So do you have any confidence at all that the current government will get on top of this problem? They know this is one of the biggest electoral issues coming up to the next general election.
Well, the good thing, David, is that people are actually talking about it now, and that's why I welcome Rishi Sunak saying that he's going to tackle it. Suella Braverman, to be fair to her, she was the first who said, I'm going to tackle immigration generally. It needs to be reduced. Absolutely right. Are they going to do it? As the rules are at the moment, and as the political and legal framework that is in place that we have, for so long as that obtains, I'm afraid, no, it's not going to be reduced. That is simply, it cannot happen, because there is no mechanism at the moment for lowering the numbers that are actually coming in and then lowering the numbers that are actually being allowed to stay.